Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Story Time. Now, it's when I get to stories like this where I realize that none of you probably believe me that these stories are true. But today I tell you the story of the house that blew up on Christmas Day. Literally like beside my grandparents' house. And like as I say that, I realize how fake it sounds, but I'm pretty sure if you really searched for it, you could probably find the newspaper articles about that. But I actually have 3 Christmas stories here for you today, 2 of which are a little bit interesting, the third of which is insane. So to start out, Christmas. Christmas is always a busy time for everyone, and generally speaking, growing up, I had certain traditions that every single year we did the same thing. So for example, on Christmas Eve, I would always go to my stepdad's parents or my step-grandparents, maybe. I don't know if that's the proper name for that, but we'd always go to their house, and they lived about an hour and a half away from where we lived. Now, the problem with going anywhere in Canada on Christmas is that you may just hit a snowstorm or, as we did, an ice storm. So we went there around, we left around noon, got there around 1:30 if we stopped to stay there for dinner, leave around 9 to 10 p.m., drive home and be home around midnight-ish every single year. Except for this one year where we were there and an ice storm hits. And when I say an ice storm, I mean like a solid half-inch of ice on every single roads, and we have an hour and a half of highway driving to do. And you may be thinking at this point, okay, not a huge deal. You just stay at my step-grandparents, and you stay there for the night and then leave in the next morning when some salt trucks have had time to go over the roads. Now, that's not the decision my parents made, and I was very, very confused at the time because I'm like, this is really dangerous. To give you an idea, the hour and a half drive home took about 5 hours to get home, and I didn't understand why they needed to go home so bad until we got home, because we get home and they're like, guess what? We have a present for you to open when we get home, and I'm like, we don't open presents on Christmas Eve. This is really, really weird. So we get home and they go downstairs and they grab a bag and the bag is meowing. And I think I remember that is what I said. I'm like, why is that bag meowing? Well, it turns out they got me a kitten for Christmas. Now, I'm a dog person. You guys know Dexter is my doggo now. But at the time, they were definitely cat people, so they decided to get another cat, get it for me for Christmas. And they couldn't leave the kitten overnight without killing it because it needs to eat, it needs to go to the bathroom, all of this kind of stuff. So we had to go home that night, and I didn't realize that until we got there. Now, on this drive, this hour and a half drive that turned into 5 hours, there was a point where we have to go up this giant hill, and I mean a big hill. And when there's no ice, not a big problem. When it's literally covered in ice, the way that you have to go up this, it was a 4-lane highway and it was straight up a hill. You have to go sideways because if you go straight up, you're just going to slide back down, which we saw a transport truck do. Now, keep in mind, the transport truck is sliding sideways down this giant hill, and we're going side to side trying to make our way around it. Now, we survived, obviously, if you couldn't tell. We made it, and it was really horrifying drive, but not nearly the scariest Christmas experience I have. Another one that we had is, hopefully my grandpa doesn't mind me telling this story, but years and years ago, he had a heart attack, so they put him on blood thinners, not a big deal. He's fine, and he's on blood thinners. And then a day before Christmas, he went to a hockey game, Canada versus Russia, World Junior pre-tournament game. So he goes there, comes home that night, in the middle of the night, wakes up with a bloody nose, and because he's on blood thinners, the bloody nose can't stop. So he goes to the hospital that night. This is before the Rona, obviously. This was years ago. This was 10 years ago. Gets literally a plug shoved up his nose. That's, your earplugs? It looked like one of those that they just shoved up his nose, and comes home for Christmas Eve. So Christmas Eve, my step-grandparents actually decided to come to our house that year. So my grandpa on my mom's side was there as well. We're sitting at the dinner table and my grandpa sneezes. Now, you sneeze, you normally just cover your mouth, you move on with it. Corona wasn't a thing then, so you're not worried about getting infected with a horrible disease. But he had a plug stopping his nose from bleeding. So he sneezes, immediately runs to the bathroom, and has to go back to the hospital on Christmas Eve. Now, this time, because he sneezed, he opened up the wound, and they couldn't get it to stop. Now, oddly, my friend's grandparent, his grandpa, the exact same night, went to the exact same hospital with the exact same thing, to a T. Now, for him, they just cauterized it. They stuck like a Bernie thingy up his nose, cauterized it, and it stopped. But for some reason, they didn't do that with my grandpa, so he sat there the entire night getting plugs shoved up his nose. At one point, the nurse told him, if we can't get this to stop, you're going to bleed out. And of course, that makes him panic, and because he's panicked, he bleeds more. But still, this is not the craziest thing that happened at Christmas. So, I believe I was 6 when this happened. I think I was in grade 1. And we had an entire, my grandpa's side family over to their house. Now, they lived in a townhouse, so not a very big building. So we have Christmas, we open presents. I believe this happened after dinner. I remember specifically sitting in the bathroom. So it's on the 3rd floor of the building, 2nd floor of the building, can't count. And I'm sitting in the bathroom, taking a poo with underwater goggles on. Now, I remember these goggles specifically because I got them for Christmas, and they had a little magnifying glass that could flip over to the side. And for some reason, I was sitting on the toilet wearing them because I thought they were cool. I was 6. Don't put that on me, okay? Sitting on the shitter, wearing some goggles. And all of a sudden, as I'm sitting there, the whole house starts to shake. And the immediate thought is, I didn't think I farted that hard that the whole house is shaking. Then I realized, oh wait, I'm done pooping. There was no fart there. Then I went, oh, we're having an earthquake. And I'm like, we live in Canada. That never happens. And then third option, I don't know what's going on. So I flush the toilet, run downstairs, try to figure out why everything's shaking. Literally shaking to the point where the glass panes are shaking back and forth. And as I get downstairs, my uncle, who at the time was training to be a firefighter, runs out the door. Now, I really liked my uncle, and I was 6 years old, so he goes running out the door. I go running out the door after him. You got to see what he's up to, right? So we get out there, and I'm too young to really realize what's going on, but I chase him. I chase him kind of down a street and then to the left, not very far. Now I could probably run it in 30 seconds. Then it probably took me a minute and a half. But for him, he was well ahead of me. Now, because I ran out the door, my mom freaks out. The house is shaking. She doesn't know what's going on. She runs out the door after me. As it turns out, about a street and a half over, not very far, someone's house blew up. And when I say blow up, you may think boom, explosion, house starts on fire. No, I'm talking house gone. The only thing sitting there is a lazy boy chair. That's all I remember from it, from being that age, is the lazy boy chair sitting there in the midst of complete rubble, all of the houses across the street beside it, windows blowing out. Years later, I became really good friends with one of the neighbors of that house, and he talks about it in a lot more detail than I can. But yeah, lazy boy sitting there. Now, depressing part of the story, it was at the end of a single man's Christmas. I'm trying to think of a way to say this without getting demonetized. He was a little lonely on Christmas and decided that he didn't want to be on Christmas anymore. And he undid the propane or gas, not propane, the natural gas line, and lit the stove, and apparently the lazy boy chair survived, but nothing else did. I think you get the point. And I didn't know that at the time. I know that now. But really, really, really sad. But I will always remember sitting there on the toilet thinking my fart shook the whole house, that I farted that loud on the toilet. And I remember getting in so much trouble for running outside the house by myself. But I'm like, Mom, you don't understand. My uncle did it, so why isn't it okay that I did it? And she's like, 'cause you're 6. And I'm like, yeah, but I thought we were going for a run, Mom. I didn't know that this house went kaput. But yeah, that's probably the craziest thing that ever happened to me on Christmas. Literally on Christmas Day. Not Christmas Eve, not the day after, on Christmas Day, right after Christmas dinner. And I kind of forgot about it. It's one of those things that I didn't really think of it until we were streaming the one day and someone's like, what's the craziest thing that happened on Christmas? And it was like, oh my God, I can't believe I've never told this story. It's super sad. If you're alone on Christmas, reach out to someone, reach out to a friend, reach out to a family member, just call them, talk to them. Even if you're not with them, especially this year, right? Especially this year where, like, I live alone. I'm technically alone on Christmas, but my mom, because the way the rules work, she's allowed to come over on Christmas. It's lonely. It's a lonely time. Normally we have a big family Christmas, but just know next year's going to be better. Once you can get that needle, it's going to be better, and we're going to see more people, and yeah. This got really depressing. Anyway, Merry Christmas.
Christmas tree, oh Christmas tree, the leaves are so unchanging. Oh Christmas tree.